In the hushed corridors of the private surgical center, tension crackled like static in the air. Liam Spencer, beloved son of media magnate Bill Spencer, lay unconscious beneath a sterile glare, his fate balanced on a razor's edge. Moments earlier, he had been wheeled into the OR for a radical, experimental brain procedure, an operation born of desperation, persuaded by the relentless insistence of Dr. Grace Buckingham. Grace, ever the ambitious neurosurgeon, had seized upon the Spencer heir's life-or-death condition as her proving ground. She had leaned on Liam with a mixture of clinical detachment and personal charm, whispering that the groundbreaking trial might be his only chance, that the risk of neurological damage paled beside the specter of tumor proliferation. To secure his consent, she had maneuvered through his defenses, called in favors from Dr. John Finnegan, and capitalized on a shared history of loyalty and heartbreak. In the aftermath of a sudden shooting at Forrester Creations, an event that left everyone reeling, Grace cornered Bill Spencer himself, her eyes alight with equal parts triumph and calculation. She painted the surgery as nothing less than miraculous, a bullet-defying coup d'etat that would cement her reputation. Bill agreed, his paternal instinct urging him to grasp any sliver of hope for his only son. The consent was signed in secret. No press release, no fanfare, just a discreet nod to the surgical team that this procedure would happen at dawn, before the world even knew Liam was in surgery. As the anesthesia drugs coursed through Liam's veins, Grace paused at the threshold of the OR, pausing only long enough to savor the gravity of her achievement. She had secured a cool $1 million from the Spencer Foundation, ostensibly to fund research, but in truth to bolster her clinic's bottom line and her own burgeoning fame in the medical journals. Her colleagues, though competent, remained conspicuously silent, their eyes darting away whenever she passed. Something about the hushed deference, the unspoken tension, hinted at doubts beneath their professional masks. Yet none dared to voice them, not when the payoff was so lucrative and the stakes so high. The hours crawled by like days. Finn, pacing outside the OR in his crisp white coat, felt the weight of every heartbeat echoing through the steel doors. He had urged Liam to reconsider, had worried stealthily that Grace's experimental methods skirted the edges of ethical approval, that the surgery teetered too far into uncharted territory. But Liam, driven by the twin forces of fear and hope, had cast his lot with Grace. Now he lay dormant beneath the scalpel's path, his future suspended in a sterile void. Then came the moment Bill Spencer had been dreading and, in a way, planning for the instant he'd agreed to Grace's terms. Liam's pulse remained steady, but the lines on the monitors began to wobble, flicker, as though the machinery itself hesitated. Grace's voice, calm and clipped, echoed through the intercom. Vital signs stable. We're making good progress. Tumor is encapsulated. Proceeding with excision. But for Bill, stable meant precious little. He remembered the litany of complications she'd casually mentioned: hemorrhage, infection, irreversible nerve damage, paralysis. None of it sat right with him. He could wait no longer. In the hushed sanctuary of the surgical floor, Bill slid through a side door, a look of grim determination on his face. The surveillance cameras, programmed to monitor only staff and sterile equipment, revealed no trace of his intrusion. Grace, absorbed in her work, offered no resistance. Whether prearranged or spontaneous, Bill's next move was audacious. He ordered the anesthesiologist to maintain Liam's induced coma while he personally arranged for his son's extraction. Two burly orderlies, chest raised in silent obedience to the Spencer name, bore Liam on a gurney out of the operating suite, through a maze of sterile hallways, and into the relative privacy of Bill's personal wing. An off-the-books recovery suite he kept on standby for crises just like this one. Within minutes, a hush descended over the surgical center. Nurses found empty corridors, surgical instruments cold under bright lights, and operations seemingly abandoned mid-procedure. Panic rippled through the staff as whispers of a missing patient spread. The center's security chief initiated lockdown protocols. The front desk fielded frantic calls from the Spencer Foundation. Meanwhile, Grace stood sterile and alone in the OR, scrubbed in but without a patient. She stared at the scalpel, her triumph curdling into alarm. Had she underestimated Bill's willingness to flout medical ethics or the law itself to protect his blood? By the time word reached Hope Logan and Steffi Forrester, they were already consumed by worry. Both women had rushed to the surgical center at dawn, buoyed by optimism, only to find empty waiting rooms and broken promises. Finn and Bridget, now aware of Grace's ruthless ambition and the real peril Liam faced, joined the frantic search. Yet no one could locate him. Bill's private wing remained off-limits, its existence known only to those closest to the Spencer empire. To everyone else, Liam had vanished. As the sun dipped behind the Pacific horizon on Thursday, July 17, 2025, the media spin machines whirred into motion. A terse statement from Spencer Publications acknowledged unexpected developments during Liam's neurosurgery, but assured the public that Liam Spencer is under the care of a highly skilled medical team. No mention of absconding with the patient, no hint of internal strife, only the carefully crafted veneer of control. Meanwhile, gossip columns speculated wildly. Was Liam in a coma? Had complications forced Bill's hand? Did Grace's experimental procedure constitute medical malpractice? Inside Bill's secluded suite, Liam remained unconscious, monitors beeping softly in the dim light. Bill, ever the strategist, had stocked the room with the finest neurologists and critical care nurses money could hire, personnel sworn to secrecy by ironclad NDAs and the promise of sizable bonuses. He paced the room, hands clasped behind his back, wrestling with the weight of every potential outcome. If Liam woke up with cognitive deficits, who would bear the responsibility? Would Grace's name be dragged through the mud? Worse, could the tabloid vultures exploit Liam's vulnerability to drive a wedge between Bill and his son? But Bill's concerns ran deeper. He questioned whether Grace was still lurking in the wings, ready to capitalize on Liam's convalescence as her next milestone. Could she be plotting to vanish once Liam stirred, then re-emerge proclaiming herself his savior, demanding another $1 million transfer to continue rehabilitative therapies? Bill refused to leave that to chance. He intended to monitor every move Grace made, to keep his enemies and allies at arm's length until Liam was back on his feet. Outside, the rumor mill churned. Hope and Steffi, hearts pounding, vowed to uncover the truth. Finn, torn between loyalty to his mentor and the Spencer family, began piecing together the trail Grace had left behind, the hurried phone calls, the unexplained bank deposits, the hushed conversations with Bill. Bridget, resourceful as ever, reached out to old contacts in hospital administration, searching for any record of Liam's transfer. Yet the deeper they delved, the more they realized how thoroughly Bill had covered his tracks. In the coming hours, the question on everyone's lips would be simple yet haunting. Would Liam wake up whole, the tumor excised without a trace, ready to reclaim his life and love? Or would he emerge a shadow of himself, bound to wheelchairs and nursing routines, his fate exploited by those who saw him as nothing more than a means to an end? And what of Grace? Would she fade into anonymity, her reckless gamble blown up in her face, or would she emerge unscathed, another notch in her illustrious career, ready to sweep in with a triumphant grin as Liam's miracle worker? As the Thursday night sky deepened to indigo, the stage was set for an episode that promised to deliver every ounce of drama, betrayal, and moral ambiguity that the bold and the beautiful fans craved. One thing was certain. When Liam Spencer finally awoke, the reverberations of this clandestine operation would echo through Los Angeles and beyond, reshaping alliances and redefining loyalties in ways no one could predict. And somewhere, in the silent chambers of Bill Spencer's private suite, the future of the Spencer dynasty hung in the balance, one breath away from revelation, one heartbeat from chaos. In the sterile confines of the private surgical suite, where every instrument gleamed beneath cold, unblinking lights, Dr. Grace Buckingham stood triumphant, her chest heaving with the thrill of victory and the hush of secrecy. Moments earlier, she had completed the most daring and controversial brain surgery of her career, the removal of a malignant tumor from Liam Spencer's brain, performed without the hospital's approval, without the oversight of the ethics board, without a shred of institutional authorization. The implications of her audacity were staggering. She had bypassed protocols, forged consent forms, and leveraged her formidable charm to persuade both the anesthesiologist and the nursing staff to look the other way. She had cut deep into the Spencer fortune, both financially and reputationally, garnering a $1 million research grant transferred in hushed wires from Bill Spencer's personal accounts. Grace had carved out time in the dead of night, her scalpel slicing through white matter as if she were a sculptor refining marble, her heart racing with the promise of professional glory and secured funding. When the final layer of tissue fell away and the malignant cells lay exposed, she flushed with triumph. She had cured terminality itself, or so she believed. Yet in the echoing aftermath, when the monitors blipped in steady rhythm and Liam remained unconscious under her care, a creeping unease settled into her bones. She had pulled off the miracle, but at what cost? Outside the sealed doors of the OR, in the hushed corridors of the private wing, Dr. John Finn Finnegan and Dr. Bridget Forrester paced with grim determination. Finn's jaw was set, his white coat uncharacteristically wrinkled from restless pacing, while Bridget's eyes glinted with steely resolve. They had received an anonymous tip, an internal memo slipped under the door of the neurosurgery department, detailing Grace's illicit midnight operation. Their professional pride raged at the betrayal. The hospital's reputation hung in the balance, the integrity of every surgeon on staff teetered on the brink, and the patient, Liam Spencer, had become a pawn in a reckless gambit. Finn, whose history of loyalty to Grace ran deep, felt the sting of personal betrayal as he reread the forged authorization. He pressed his palm to the cool metal of the surgical suite door, heart aching at the thought of Grace wielding her scalpel in the shadows, unchecked by any moral compass. Bridget, ever the pragmatist, had already contacted the hospital's legal counsel, laying the groundwork for an injunction to freeze Grace's privileges and trigger an immediate inquiry by the medical board. They knew that once news of the unauthorized surgery reached the state medical board and the hospital's insurance underwriters, the fallout would be catastrophic: malpractice suits, federal investigations. A media frenzy painting the hospital as complicit in a crime against patient rights. Inside Bill Spencer's private recovery wing, billowing drapes and pristine white walls concealed Liam's fragile form, an array of monitors tracking every neural impulse. Bill himself hovered at the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable, torn between relief that the tumor had been excised and panic that his son's life might yet hang by a thread. He had clandestinely orchestrated Liam's extraction from the surgical center moments after Grace's triumphant pronouncement. Whether premeditated or born of paternal instinct, Bill's bold move had left the rest of the hospital staff scrambling, security protocols in disarray, and whispers circulating of a missing patient. But now the walls of his private suite offered no protection against the storm Finn and Bridget were about to unleash. As dawn broke over Los Angeles, illuminating the city's palm-lined boulevards and the sprawling expanse of the hospital campus, Finn and Bridget convened an emergency meeting with the hospital's chief of staff, the legal department, and the director of nursing. The conference room hummed with tension. Charts lay strewn across the table, medical codes and regulatory statutes, forming a battleground for the hospital's future. Finn detailed how Grace had circumvented the Institutional Review Board, violated the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act by falsifying patient records, and breached multiple sections of the California Business and Professions Code governing medical practice. Bridget, her voice steady, outlined the legal remedies. Suspension of Grace's medical license pending a full investigation, a civil suit for negligence and fraud, and notification of the state medical board within 24 hours to preempt any cover-up allegations. Each word struck like a gavel in that room, the gravity of their plan weighing heavily on every attendee. Meanwhile, Grace Buckingham, unaware that her double-edged triumph was about to consume her, paced her office suite, an elegant loft overlooking the city skyline. Her phone buzzing with congratulatory messages from research sponsors and university colleagues eager to publish a case study. She reveled in her apparent success, drafting an abstract for the upcoming neurosurgical conference. She would present Liam's surgery as a watershed moment in tumor excision techniques. She imagined her name in bold letters across medical journals, invitations to speak at symposiums, a book deal on the miraculous triumph of modern medicine. But when her secretary hesitantly mentioned an inquiry and a possible freeze on her surgical privileges, Grace's elation curdled into rage. She slammed her hand onto the desk, her carefully curated facade of composure slipping. Her colleagues in the hospital, once silent, now emboldened by Finn and Bridget's revelations, began to whisper in hallways, casting furtive glances at the door of her suite. By mid-afternoon, the hospital's public relations team, coached by Bridget's legal directives, prepared a carefully worded statement. "We are investigating the circumstances surrounding Mr. Spencer's brain surgery. Patient safety and adherence to ethical standards are our highest priorities. We are cooperating fully with regulatory authorities." It was damning in its implication, yet impeccably crafted to preserve the hospital's reputation. Meanwhile, Finn delivered the incriminating documents to the state medical board, his hands shaking with a mixture of righteous indignation and fear for the future of the hospital where he had trained. He and Bridget had uncovered not just a single violation, but a web of compromised ethics spanning forged documents, undisclosed financial incentives, and a reckless disregard for patient consent. As evening approached, Grace found herself isolated in the dim glow of her office lights, the city's neon pulse pulsing beneath her window. The congratulatory emails had dried up, replaced by terse inquiries from the hospital's credentialing committee, legal summons, and a cold message from Bill Spencer's attorney demanding the return of the $1 million grant pending verification of proper procedure. Her phone, once an instrument of prestige, now rang only with silence or distant, clipped voices. She realized, with a sickening lurch, that her career and the hospital's standing rested on a knife's edge far sharper than any scalpel she had wielded. In the hushed aftermath, Liam remained unconscious, his neural pathways still recovering from surgery, unaware of the battle raging over his life. Bill Spencer, ever the protector, fortified the private suite with additional staffing and surveillance, determined to shield his son from media scrutiny and legal entanglements. But he also understood that no fortress of wealth could hold back the tide of public opinion once the first headlines broke. Hope Logan and Steffi Forrester, fueled by loyalty to Liam, had been barred from the suite by legal injunctions and NDAs. Their pleas for access only magnified the sense of injustice settling over the hospital. Finn and Bridget, despite their personal anguish at betraying a friend and colleague, pressed on relentlessly, united by a singular conviction that medicine, above all, must never be a playground for ambition or a conduit for deceit. As the clock ticked toward another sleepless night at the hospital, every corridor seemed to whisper the same ominous question. Would justice prevail, restoring faith in the healing sanctity of the operating room? Or would the scandal erupt into a maelstrom so fierce that it would dismantle careers, tarnish reputations, and leave the hospital teetering on the brink of ruin? In the silence of that moment, the fates of Grace Buckingham, Finn Finnegan, Bridget Forrester, and the entire Spencer dynasty hung suspended, poised for a revelation that would change everything or destroy it all.
Oh.